Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us in the Voiceflow Newsroom. Let's get started. So at Voiceflow, we're constantly innovating and improving our new features, and we wanted a way for everyone to see our latest product news live, get best practices, and also get a sneak peek into our future roadmap. Best of all, you can ask questions live in our Q&A and get access to our awesome product team. I also wanted to quickly introduce myself. So hey, everyone, my name is Kim. I'm on the Voiceflow marketing team, and I'm the host of this new series, Voiceflow Newsroom. I'm joined here today with our exciting product team, who I will also let introduce themselves as we get started here. So I'll pass it to Rob.
Rob Hayes, I lead up the product team here at Voiceflow. Chris?
Oh, sorry. Yes, hi, I'm Chris. I'm one of the product managers here, and I work on core experience, and I'll pass it off to Zoran.
Hey, everybody, I'm Zoran. I am the product manager for the platform team, and then throwing it to Daniel.
Cool. Hey, everyone, I'm Daniel, formerly on the CS side and now on the growth side of the product team.
Awesome. So we're really excited for this event because I think it allows us to take a little time to frame up a lot of the feature development work that we've been doing on the product side over the last quarter here at Voiceflow, and really just help to to reintroduce some of these features, as you may or may not see them all out as they roll out, but also contextualize them a bit in terms of what are the problems that we're trying to solve from conversational AI teams we're working with. We really pride ourselves on how customer centric we are and how much customer feedback we like to collect as part of our discovery work to really figure out where we need to be focusing our time improving the platform. And some of the biggest challenges we're seeing conversational AI teams run into today as their practice is growing really focuses around scaling. I think this is, it's a great sign that so many teams that are working in this space, that are building products in this space, are really, they're growing. They're getting more headcount. The scope and size of the assistants they're building is expanding. The number of tools at their disposal is growing as well. But with that growth, it introduces a few unique challenges. And in that, there's a lot of siloing that happens within the workflow, the end-to-end workflow for bringing conversational AI products to market. Different data sets get owned by different teams. They get built out in different tools. And ultimately, all of that data needs to be brought together manually. It's manpower that's going into creating synchronization in this workflow. And that's, that's a big time investment that's going into that. And so, because this workflow is fragmented, data is often siloed. Once you ultimately get your assistants into production, or you make new releases, add new feature set, build new flows on those assistants, it's hard to get concise insight in terms of how that's performing and where the areas for optimization are on your assistant experience. And so, I think what we're really seeing is that, teams large and small we're working with have some form of these three challenges that they're trying to address in order to grow up their practice and increase the product, the scale of the assistants that they're working on. And so, from our perspective, what we're really focused on with Voiceflow and the direction we want to take the platform is to support teams using Voiceflow, creating a connected workflow. Ultimately, what does that mean? It really having synchronization between the tools that you're building to design, to test, to prototype, and the tools you're using to launch your assistants in production. And the hope in doing this is that we can really reduce the number of tools that you're dependent on for your end-to-end workflow, reduce the amount of manual effort, the amount of copying and pasting from Excel sheets into NLUs, and allow you to reinvest that time back into expanding the feature sets or honing in on the KPIs that your assistants are built to address. And ultimately, the hope there is that we can really provide a single source of truth for your end-to-end assistant experience. Now, not every team's there. We recognize that, and different conversational AI teams are at different levels of maturity in their practice. Some are focused on a project by project designing and prototyping of their of the experiences, the flows they're designing, and they're ultimately just manually doing a manual handoff of those requirements. Some are at the point where we're looking to centralize all of the data and context around our assistant into a single source of truth. And so you're bringing together all of that data under one roof. And for those that have that source of truth created, now you're looking at, okay, how can we integrate Voiceflow, into our production platforms and truly make it a connected workflow that our CAI team is working with. And so as I pass it off to the other product team members here, we'll talk you through a bit of what we've built over the last quarter that supports your efforts at each of these stages in scaling up your conversational AI practice. And hopefully it helps to contextualize some of the features where they can be applied within your teams to help you, take that next step of growth towards, ultimately having a fully integrated workflow for your conversational AI team. So I'll pass this off to Zoran, to Daniel, and he can take us through some of what we're working on the design and prototyping side. Daniel,
awesome.
Take it away.
Cool. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, great. So this first part is really focused on getting you to your first prototype faster. And so within Voiceflow, you have the design process of actually going in, starting your design, doing the early phase, and then actually getting to your detailed design. And so in that early phase where you're actually putting out the first design on canvas and getting it up to the point where you can have a source of truth, that's what at least I'm focused on, making it a bit faster. And we're doing that through two areas. The first one is through integrating large language models and AI into the design process to speed it up, which I'll walk you through. And the second one is around content and delivery of content to help you adopt best practices. And so without a doubt, the largest thing to happen in the conversation design space this quarter, this year, even last year, is the introduction of large language models like GPT-3. It's something that's top of mind for every conversation designer that we're working with, and it's very top of mind for us right now. At Voiceflow, we're focusing on two main areas with large language models, or LLMs. The first one is speeding up your design workflow. And so after working with hundreds of conversation designers over the past 2 years, we've been able to pinpoint areas of the design process that take up time. So examples are things like utterance generation, entity generation, reprompts, and more. They're all core parts of conversation design, but they take away from the core aspect of building out your happy path and your error prompts and your flows that actually become your system. And so that's where we started rolling out some of the initial features to help speed up your design times by at least 2 times. And so to give you a sense of what this looks like, here's a quick demo of the newest and highest used feature in Voiceflow, AI utterance generation.
To help you go from starting to collaborating faster, we've introduced a series of new features powered by AI and large language models to help you 2x your design speed. The first feature is utterance generation. What this allows you to do is create a new utterance in your project. So I'm going to go ahead and drag out a choice step here. We're going to call this utterance check order status. And now, instead of me thinking about all the utterances that I need to add, I can give the AI a sample utterance. For example, I want to check the status of order, and let's go order number. And based on this data and the name of the intent, I can actually have the AI generate 5 sample utterances, 10, 20, however many I want right off the bat. And so you can see that it came up with 5 different options here, and it also incorporated the entity that I used within it. So now instead of me thinking of what to add, I can hit accept, and now I've got my first intent. This feature makes it way faster to design some of your initial intents and takes a lot of the guesswork around building a strong NLU model, especially when you're just starting off your design and you want to get to user testing faster.
Awesome. Cool. So this one's super cool. We released this over the break. Our team did a sprint and released utterance generation. And within a matter of weeks, we've seen it become a staple and a core part of almost every conversation designer who's using Voiceflow and their workflow. And we've not just applied it here, we've also applied it to other areas like no match reprompts, error pathing, variant generation, entity generation. You can find out all of those in our docs, or if you're on Voiceflow, on the canvas, you'll see a little AI button in the bottom left corner. Go ahead and click that, and that'll kind of give you access to some of the features that we played around with. And so as we work more on integrating LLMs into Voiceflow this year, you're going to see more and more features like this popping up, making it easier and faster to design on Voiceflow and get your team to the source of truth. The second area we're really heavily focused on, which is really exciting and really kind of paints the future of conversation design, is actually letting you experiment with using large language models directly in production with your assistant. And so our prototypes in Voiceflow are a sandbox for experimenting with this tech and understanding how large language models can work with the NLU models and the logic you've already built out in your conversational assistant. The future of large language models don't replace conversation design, but work with NLU models and logic to create highly contextual prompts that give users exactly what they're looking for with your business context in mind. The best example of how we started doing this and are continuing to do this is with the generate step. So we released a generate step about a week ago, and it allows you to send a prompt directly to GPT-3 and populate it in your flow. And so I'll let the best person explain this, and that's going to be Braden, our CEO. And so we're going to do a quick demo where Braden's going to walk us through what that looks like.
Hi everyone, happy Thursday. So we just launched a brand new AI assist feature in Voiceflow, which is the AI generation step. So what this step allows you to do is to actually do prompt engineering right within Voiceflow. So what's cool about this is you can actually go ahead and write raw large language model prompts, such as give me travel tips for. I can then actually use the entities within our assistant, go ahead and generate a preview of this. Let's put in SF. And what's nice is this is going to generate, it's going to go ahead and actually generate the content for us. And you can either do this at runtime, meaning when your assistant is actually sort of in production, you can do it, dynamically, or you can also go ahead and copy the content and then just use it within your project. So really up to you whether you want it to have it be fully dynamic, or whether you want to sort of just use it as a way to generate content and then stick it into your project in sort of more of a hard-coded way. Now, what I've done here is I've actually chained together a bunch of different AI generate steps, and this is called prompt chaining. And so what we're doing is we're using a large language model, but chaining the prompts together to actually create a conversation. So in this case, I've got a fun little assistant called Sassy Starbucks. And what we're doing is we're saying, hey, a customer comes in 10 minutes before closing time, write an opening message asking them what they want. We're then running through NLU first. So we're determining what the user actually wants using an NLU model, and then we're capturing any entities, and then we're actually injecting those into the prompt. So you'll actually see we're doing some entity injection here. What's really cool about this is we're saying, hey, see if the user wants to order a coffee. If they do want to order a coffee, and obviously this is a very simple sort of like just one intent flow. If they want to order a coffee, and we need to know the size and the type. If we don't have those, ask for them. Once we have them, we run a little bit of logic, we ask for their name, and we complete the order. So let's actually test it out. So here we are. It's going to go ahead and generate a prompt. Great. What can I get for you in a hurry? I'm going to say, I want coffee. And so what that's going to do is it's going to go ahead and you'll see it's got the intent confidence of 98% for our order intent. I can say, dark roast. And then now what it's going to do, it's going to say, great, we've determined that they want dark roast. Cool, what size would they like? Small, medium, or large? And so just a really cool way to actually do entity collection. And then the last thing I want to show off here is if I actually restart this, you'll see at the top here, I've got this fun little, write your reply in all caps using the customer's language. So you could actually, for example, ask something in French and you could have the assistant actually respond in French. So you can do really cool stuff now with AI content generation in Voiceflow. And just for fun, I will show you what time do you close today? This should invoke our fallback intent, and it's going to bring us up here and write a pretty sassy response in all caps. So pretty fun, brand new step right within Voiceflow. You can start playing around with prompt chaining, entity injection, and just AI content generation all within Voiceflow in our new AI Assist. Hope you guys enjoy it. Yeah, let us know what you think.
Awesome. And so I hope that video gave you a little bit of context. What Brain was able to do was use a generate step and combine that with an NLU model, an intent, and some logic to actually create a flow. And so when a user starts a conversation, the LLM actually greets them. Based on what they're saying, it's going to use the intent to direct them towards a specific part of the conversation flow. It's going to then actually use an LLM to do some entity collection. Then it's going to run them through some conversational logic that's going to be specific to the business, and then finally spit out a response. And so I hope this gives you a sense of how you're starting to see large language models work with conversation design, where if this was your business, you'd be able to use intents to understand what area of your business a user wants to interact with, being able to use large language models to collect any necessary information and engage with them in a very flexible and dynamic way, and then use your conversational logic to route them to where you want a user to go. So tons of opportunity. We've already seen a number of customers that are experimenting with this and really using Voiceflow again as a playground and a sandbox to see what the future of LLMs are going to look like with their business and what the future might look like when they have large language models powered by their own data. And so a ton of exciting stuff around the LLM space that's happening in Voiceflow. If you've got any ideas, please let us know. We've got an in-app chat in the bottom right on the Voiceflow canvas. And so outside of that, another big question is how we're going to keep up with all of this. And so super quick, we've put a ton of effort into revamping our docs and our tutorials and making them easily accessible inside of the canvas. You're going to see a new dashboard come out in the next couple months or weeks. Chris will kind of explain more about that. But in here, you'll have access to templates that you can load into your project with some of these steps baked in, tutorials, best practice guides on scaling your assistant, video walkthroughs, everything you need to actually get started. And on top of that, we're also focused on delivering it to you as you build. So as you start building with your assistant, you might start seeing pop-ups helping you and guiding you through some of the best practices and features to use to start making your assistant more of a source of truth and make it easier to collaborate with your team. But on that topic of scaling your assistant and actually building a source of truth, I'm going to hand it off to Chris, who's going to walk through some of the features we built in Voiceflow to help you take it from a simple prototype to a true source of truth for your team.
Thanks, Daniel. So in this next section, we're just going to talk through how you might, what kind of tools you can apply to build and manage complex assistants over time. So last year, we introduced more ways that you can design projects at scale with hierarchy features like domains, topics and components, and actually just this past week, we launched something called Subtopics. So these features are particularly useful for many of you that may have broken out a single assistant into multiple project files, and applying things like domains and topics, basically any kind of hierarchy, really lets you start consolidating things into a unified design. So some of the benefits that come along with consolidation is that it lets you build a unified component system, things like a shared block template library, and a consistent NLU that you can manage just in a single spot and then apply it across your entire experience. And we know that some of the pitfalls when you're chunking things out is that, again, you're losing that high-level view of all of the data and content that lives inside of your assistant. And there's lots of manual maintenance that's required to make sure that things are consistent across these files, especially if you're applying things like shared components in multiple places. And of course, you are also unable to leverage things like our advanced navigation features like actions when you're siloing everything. So there's certainly a much better way that you can work within our tool. And we wanted to make it really easy for you to start pulling together everything into that single design source of truth. And before we jump into a demo here, I just wanted to show you a quick breakdown of what this structure could potentially look like in Voiceflow. So you'll see here that within our workspaces, we have seat management and global permissions that kind of sit at the top. And then you have your individual assistants, formerly known as projects. And then within those assistants, you can apply multiple layers of hierarchy. So domains to kind of figure out things like high-level feature areas, and then more granular to subject areas using topics and subtopics. So lots of different ways that you can play around with structure here. So I'm just going to jump into a demo to show you what that might look like on Canvas. You'll see here in my structure that I have a grocery assistant web chat project, and I'm currently on the welcome domain. So domains can be used to structure high-level feature areas that your assistant might be able to handle. So the different competencies that your assistant is equipped with. So these can be fairly high level. The buckets that I have created here are really about use case. So I have, for instance, just a generic welcome flow, but I also have a special and promotions domain, new purchases domain, get help, and existing orders. So these are like the top level competencies for my assistant. You'll notice here that, for instance, when I flip over to my existing orders domain, that even though the topic section is different, that my components list is constant. So that means that all of these different components that I've built out here, they can be accessed anywhere in my experience. So it just makes it super easy to be able to leverage things like business logic that maybe gets applied in many different places. And you have like just, you need to maintain one component system and it can be applied everywhere for your entire web chat experience. So now that we've kind of covered, again, that what a domain could potentially be, again, that high level competency or use case, if you're drilling down an extra layer beneath that, like what could a topic be potentially? So in my existing orders domain, I have the following topics: order status, cancel order, modify order items, and change delivery date. So it's all thematically related to that top level existing order use case. It's just an extra level of granularity. So the different subject areas that your assistant can handle that all belong to existing orders. Let's say that maybe you have a particularly complex topic and there are lots of different intents that are applied to it, or maybe you just have a really complex canvas that's associated with like one of these topics. That's where subtopics comes into play. So for instance, for order status, if I expand out this dropdown, I can see that I have many different things that are kind of applied here that are indicative of the flow that I've built out. But I can also add a subtopic, which is its own canvas that allows you to create groupings, basically folders for different intents, or like even just a grouping for a specific subsection of this order status canvas that maybe you just want to chunk out. So you can think about subtopics as, again, acting as that visual folder layer that lets you just better manage like particularly complex topics over time. So you can, of course, create many different subtopics if you wanted to. You can also choose to not have any if maybe your topic didn't really require it. So it's a fairly flexible system that lets you just kind of create more management options as your flows continue to grow in complexity. So I'd definitely invite everybody to kind of play around with these structures and see what works best for you. We also, of course, have two conversion features that would make it super easy for you to just kind of play around with what feels right. You can convert components, or what were formerly known as flows, into a topic and see how that might work. We also have a feature that lets you convert any existing projects as a nested domain inside of another destination project. So I definitely invite you to check out our documentation to learn how you might be able to do that. Okay, awesome. And so the partner piece, of course, to being able to design these complex assistant experiences is how do I manage my workflow as well as my teams in Voiceflow? So we know that many of you work in cross-functional teams with diverse blends of stakeholders and collaborators. So we have a few enhancements coming up that's just going to help you coordinate workflow access and navigation. So now that we've talked about project consolidation, we want to show you some of the upcoming workflow enhancements, just so that it's easier for you and your team to track all the different work that's happening within these larger complex files. So you'll see here that I have an update to our core dashboard experience, and my assistants, aka projects, are represented as these cards. So I have a delivery assistant for IVR and that grocery assistant that we were working off of before. And you'll also notice that we have some updates to our header as well as our sidebar that just make some of our help content a bit more accessible. So like what Daniel mentioned, we have lots of guides as well as YouTube videos to help you get started. When I click into one of these assistant cards, I'm now taken to this overview screen. So you can think about this as a directory of all of the different domains that exist within your assistant. And within this section, I also get some top level information like the current workflow status for this specific domain. This is a feature we introduced last year, and it just lets you assign whether this domain is currently being worked on. So it's in design, if it's being reviewed by you or your stakeholders, as well as complete, so hand it off to production. So the status is a nice way of still being able to communicate like which of these are actively being iterated on versus things that maybe have already launched. We also have a last modify column here that just tracks the last time that someone made edits in these different sections. And it just gives you some higher level understanding of the recency of the updates for each of these different areas. And we, of course, have advanced navigation here in terms of jumping to domains, as well as hopping over to topics that are nested within these individual areas too. So lots of sorting and searching and filtering options, especially as you continue to grow out and mature your assistant experiences. If you were still really wanting to use our Kanban-based board that we had before, you can just go into our workspace settings. And here you'll see two options for dashboard styles. So currently I had it on cards, which is the new view. And if I wanted to go back to the old Kanban-based view, when I go back into my assistant tab here, you'll see that I have those columns back. So the one detractor about this old view is that you won't get access to some of the features that we just took a look at, including that overview page. So if you wanted to kind of get that higher level view of some of your assistant files, we'd recommend that you use cards. So definitely recommend kind of jumping back and forth and seeing which one would work for you as you're doing your consolidation efforts. Okay, awesome. So we covered designing at scale. We also covered management at scale. So we kind of see both of those things coming together within this next batch of updates. We have, of course, more granular details coming up with all the different features that you can expect to come out as part of that big dashboard push, which we're very excited about, including, Matt, I hear you, assistant level permissions will be included as part of that release. So we'll make sure that you get all of the details on how you can apply that in your workspaces. And with that, I'll pass it off to Zoran, who's going to talk to us a little bit more in depth about the connected workflow.
Thank you, Chris. And hey, everybody, I'm super excited about the next part of this conversation, which is something that I know many of you have been asking for a long time. And it's, hey, I'm building my designs in Voiceflow. All my assistant data is there. My NLU data, my training data, my flow data, my response content. But how do I do more with it? How do I integrate it with my existing technology stack that I'm using today? The things that I'm about to touch on in this presentation are designed to serve that use case. So the first piece that I want to be touching on today are data imports. I think everyone has gone through this exercise before. You sign up to Voiceflow, you get access to your account, and you are given a blank canvas. And you've probably already built your assistant somewhere else. It's living in another tool like Dialogflow CX, in Rasa, in IBM Watson. And wouldn't it be great that you can start getting value out of Voiceflow immediately by iterating on the assistants that you've already built? And so what we're building over the coming months are data imports that are going to allow you to take that blank canvas to your source of truth for your existing assistant in a matter of moments. And so what we're talking about here is more than what you can do today. So as you're aware, you can already pull in your NLU data, but we want to go one step further. We want to allow you to pull in your response content, your flow content, and have that all live within a specific assistant on the Voiceflow canvas. And then you can start making those improvements immediately. And so that's going to give your team a lot more efficiency in the workflow. It's going to make sure that you're not doing copy and paste and redundancy. And also like maybe a not well understood part of this process as well is that we're going to be mapping some of these concepts for you from these third-party services into Voiceflow. So to use Dialogflow CX as an example, they have their own idea about how to design an assistant. They have flow, they have pages, they have routes. Well, how does that exactly map to Voiceflow? We're going to go through that process for you, do that concept mapping so that when you get access to Voiceflow, you don't have to figure it out yourself. And we'll show a demo of this shortly. The next part, you have your assistant inside of Voiceflow, you're making updates to it, you're making iterations, and now you want to get that back into your production platform. So what we've seen a number of customers do today with existing tooling on Voiceflow is actually build these connectors that can take all of that assistant data that you're building on Voiceflow and convert it into a compatible format for third-party tooling. And so again, we've seen this case again and again with tools like Rasa, with Dialogflow ES, with Microsoft Bot Framework Composer. And so we're trying to build more tools, more templates, more guides to make this process incredibly easy and to accelerate a lot of your work. And so what we're trying to do here is build something that is flexible enough to understand that everyone is designing differently in their production assistants. Even if the same customer is building, if two different customers are building in CX, they might be using flows completely differently. They might be using pages completely differently. And so what we wanted to make sure here is that we're not going to be the tool that dictates exactly how you need to build in these third-party tools, because they have a lot of features that you want to continue using. But hopefully with all the things that we're building out now, we can accelerate that development. We can give you a lot of enablement to go and basically build that end-to-end integration between Voiceflow as your design workflow layer, import, export. The Voiceflow component is now a much more integrated component in your entire conversational AI workflow. And so with that as well, I'll be going into a demo to show an example of this. To start, let's take a look at an importer. So I have my agent inside of Dialogflow CX. This one is for car rentals. I have my main flow and then all of my pages associated with this flow. And so what I want to do is go ahead and grab this file and represent it inside of the Voiceflow canvas. So what I'll be showing you next is once this export is completed and you run it through the Voiceflow importer for Dialogflow CX agents, what is it going to look like on the other side? Okay, so I'm now in Voiceflow, and you can see in the left-hand panel here under the topics header, I have a number of pages that are reflective of the pages that you just saw in CX. And you can also see that I'm currently on the economy options page, where you have the fulfillment text, you have parameter disambiguation, and then you have all of your routes underneath related to which product was selected or which car rental was selected, with all the relevant response content, and then how those pages are then linking to other pages within your assistant. So using this importer, you're going to be able to start looking at bringing your CX agents into Voiceflow so you're not working on a blank canvas, and it's going to increase your ability to start working on iterations and improvements on the Voiceflow canvas as soon as possible. The next feature that I'm going to be talking about is on the export side. So let's move to a different project here. I have a very simple bot that I'm calling car booking, and here I have three intents: booking, escalate, economy options with the relevant response content should that intent get triggered. And so in the booking intent, you have available to you all of the training phrases that are associated with this intent. And then also on the response content side, I have in the initial text box two different variants of what the bot can return. And then you can see a very similar situation with the escalate intent and the economy options intent. So now what I want to do is actually bring this data into Lex. So all you need to do here is go ahead and export the JSON assistant file. And what I'm going to do behind the scenes is run this through the converter that we can share later as well. And so once that conversion is completed, what you have available to you, if I jump over into Lex, is a ready-to-go import of those intents directly into your Lex agent. So here I'm just going to go ahead and add those by importing them. And I'm going to have to do this one by one, but let's just start with the booking intent. Let's go add the economy options intent. And then I'm going to add the escalate intent. Okay, and so now let's take a look. With the book intent that I have available to me, I have those sample utterances that I added into Voiceflow, and then scrolling down to look at the responses, you can see here that not only do I have those responses that I built in Voiceflow, but I also have the variants for those responses as well. And you can see the same thing with the economy options and the same thing with escalate. And so with this, you're going to start seeing what opportunities are available to you to think about Voiceflow as an integrated component in your conversational AI technology stack today. Thank you. Awesome. And so in those two demos, obviously I showed the importer with Dialogflow CX. I showed an export with Lex V1. More and more tools are going to be supported over the coming months. So if you have any interest in potentially importing some of your existing systems into Voiceflow, let us know what platforms that you're using. We'd love to know what everyone is using out there so we can prioritize them. And same thing for exports. If you're really encouraged about the idea of hooking this all up and building some sort of automation, we're excited to know which tools you're using and how we can help prioritize those platforms for you to use as soon as possible. And with that, I'll pass it over to Rob.
Awesome. So that's a great overview of everything that happened in the last quarter here. There was a lot going on, but just to kind of set you up for where might we be going in this quarter, well, I can tell you, we're still focused on the same set of problems here. Everything that we're working on is really helping to unblock those blockers that teams talk about that are preventing you from scaling today. And so more work around speeding up the design experience, the prototyping experience, more opportunities to leverage large language models as part of the design and prototyping experience, more education content and education functionality that's going to make getting to the point of prototyping a lot faster for teams. As Chris took us through, the ability to represent the scale of your assistant and tools to manage all of that content, the different content types of your assistant, all in one place under Voiceflow's roof there. And as Zoran just walked us through there, the ability to connect this data in and out of the NLUs and the dialogue managers you're using today. As we mentioned off the top, so much of our roadmap is coming from the amazing feedback that our customers are giving us. We are so appreciative of everybody who gives us time to talk through, what are the pain points, what are the areas you want to expand into, and getting that to build it right back into our product roadmap. So if you do have any feedback, please reach out to us, product@Voiceflow, and we'd love to hear more of it. But that's the review today. Kim, can we get into some questions?
Yeah, let's do it. Awesome. Well, I think we're about 15 minutes from the end of our workshop, so I wanted to segue into our Q&A portion. Feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A tab. I see that Richard has already dropped them, and then we'll share them up on the screen. But just to kick things off, as questions are coming in, we did have a few that came in from signups. So let's take a look and answer them live. So the first one we have here is, how do we get and use original sources in our AI conversational work? I'm going to pass this one to Zoran.
Yeah, thank you. So much of what I just went over, we're trying to build the tools to make this really easy. We're building the importers that you can grab those original sources, depending on which platform you're using, into Voiceflow in a matter of minutes. Now, primarily what we're focusing on now are those big, NLUs, the dialogue flows, the Razas, the Lexes of the world. But if there are any other platforms out there that you're interested in potentially pulling that data in, let us know, and we can look at prioritizing that work as well.
Sweet. Thanks. And then this is another one we got. It was around content management, Excel integration. What are some better ways? I'm going to give this one to Chris.
Yeah, for sure. I think it kind of depends on what kind of content that's giving you the most pain. There are a couple of features that we have in place today that makes it really easy to reuse pieces of content, things like components, for instance, as well as block templates. If you needed more advanced, like a true CMS function, that is something that we'll be exploring later this year, which is going to be like a centralized system where you're going to be able to manage all sorts of response content that lives inside of your designs. And again, that'll also sit on the assistant level. So following the very same structure that we just talked about before. In the meantime, if you did also need maybe some easy ways to be able to find things very quickly. We do have like an advanced Canvas search function, which might be super helpful for you just to kind of navigate really quickly to wherever you need to make those modifications. But if you are also very much interested in the CMS, please let us know. We're actively doing discovery for this area right now and are very excited to push something out later this year.
Great. Yeah. Takeaways from the session. Let us know. Let us know everything.
And also,
okay.
please use components and topics. Please use them.
Sweet. All right. And then this is another one we got is, do you have any best practices or suggested uses for Voiceflow as a story building tool for small teams?
Yeah.
This one, Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. This one's a pretty cool question because for those of you who have been along the Voiceflow journey since the beginning and for a long time, you might know that Voiceflow originally started as a company that was building children's stories on Alexa, and the pain of actually being able to create all these branching stories and all the different paths was so big that we created a canvas to make it easier, and that's really kind of where Voiceflow came from and evolved from there. Today, there are so many more tools to make that process easier. Just yesterday or 2 days ago, when we released the Generate step, we saw a user who was able to use the Generate step to dynamically create children's stories for children on Alexa. And so seeing the time it's taken and how it's been reduced from what it originally was to do now is pretty cool. In terms of best practices or suggested uses, a couple things. The first one is definitely start playing around with the Generate step. If you're thinking about using large language models in your design process, now is the time to do it and start playing around. I'll also pop a video in the chat of a user who did that on Alexa and how they walked through it, just to give you some examples. The second one is also consider what channels you're looking at. And so, if you're looking to launch directly, there are a couple of channels on Voiceflow that you can use, including, Alexa, Microsoft Teams, web chat, WhatsApp. But if you're looking at any kind of third party or custom ones, you can also explore using our dialogue manager as well. Or if you want to be able to export it to a third party tool like a Dialogflow CS, looking at our kind of Voiceflow connected workflow too. I would say for a small team, it might be easier just to be able to launch directly on Voiceflow and cut out a lot of that middle process. But it really depends on your team's workflow. So takeaways from that are start experimenting with the LLM feature, check out the API step to be able to access your own models that you may have built, and then look into either hosting on Voiceflow or being able to export it directly onto the tool that you're using.
Thanks for the anecdote there. It's always nice to reflect on, how the company started. So awesome. And this is one of the other questions that we received. It's just thoughts on the future of conversation design alongside LLMs. I know this is definitely a really hype topic. So I'll pass this one to Rob.
Yeah, certainly. I think this is a hot topic of conversation in every single one of our companies here for everyone on the call. But the way that we're really thinking about this within Voiceflow is, the twofold. I think Daniel gave us a great framing up front. How do we augment the conversation design, the conversational AI creation process using LLMs? How do we speed that up by leveraging these models for data creation, for things like testing in the future, all of the aspects that we're doing purely manually as part of our process today? Where can we leverage these models to create data for us, so that our job is not necessarily the data creation, but more so curating the data that it is providing for us. So a lot of the areas that we're looking to build further integrations with LLMs into our tool is, really around any of the aspects of that, the design workflow that takes place today. I think another point came up in the chat about, what models will you support and I think that's another big aspect of this is it's really, we really want our platform to be a tool for exploration. And so, something that we want to think about moving forward is, how do you test this across the different tools on the market? We really, we function as agnostic layer on top of all of the NLUs in market, and we want to apply the same principles when we think about LLMs. And then the other side of it that Daniel framed up for us was just, how can LLMs play in on the runtime aspect of the of assistance when they're running in production? How do you start to hand off some interactions to LLMs to respond to generally? How do you provide the rules and guardrails for those LLMs to behave in those scenarios? And, again, we want our platform to really be a place for all of our customers to experiment with those ideas, to start to understand how that might interoperate with your existing experiences today. And, ultimately, when you're figuring these things, making these decisions internally about how might you leverage LLMs in the future, you should be able to provide a good use case or a good example of a use case from your work in Voiceflow. So that's really, how we're thinking about conversation designers on Voiceflow, conversational AI teams starting to leverage LLMs today in your work today.
Sweet. All right. Yeah, we also had some great questions in the chat. So do keep them coming. We will actually cast up. I see a great one from Kathy. I'm just going to put that one up on the screen just for the team to answer in more detail. If anyone wants to take this one up.
Yeah, I can take them.
Take it.
Sounds good. Yeah. So, I mean, as Rob mentioned in the chat, when you're thinking about connecting to external third parties to retrieve contextual data that's going to make your assistant even better, you can do a lot of that today using the API step or the custom JavaScript code snippet that's available inside of your design. And then your developers are the ones making those connections. But we also have a number of examples as well on our developer documentation of different ways of utilizing those steps that you might be interested in as well.
Great. Yeah, I hope that answers the question. I'm seeing there's another one from Kathy. How is Voiceflow doing real-time translations using an LLM?
It's not something we're currently handling. When you're running prototypes, it's running in the language that you've designed it in. But yeah, I think you point out a great opportunity for an application for LLMs. It's something we've experimented with internally, certainly, but opportunities to be able to have multilingual interactions. So I think that's something we're both looking to do, both just generally, how do you build a multilingual assistant, but with the introduction of LLMs into the platform, it gives us another tool to maybe enable that. So no timelines for you on anything there, but yeah, certainly we're having conversations about that one internally.
Great. All right. Yeah. Thank you for the question, Kathy. And then this was just one I wanted to put up. It was in the Q&A by Richard. And it was specific to the plans to update visual markup capabilities so the canvas can be better understood by stakeholders directly without having to recreate the flow in Miro or Visio.
Yeah, for sure. So we are planning on making enhancements to our markup features throughout the year. Unfortunately, Richard, don't have exact timelines for any of the samples that you provided here, but I think some of these definitely fit into feedback that we've heard from many of our other customers. One of the first enhancements that we will be making is going to be a sticky notes feature that also doubles up as like inline notes for your blocks. So I think that some of our customers may have seen very early iterations of what that might potentially look like, but that's one thing that we think is going to be super impactful just for communicating generally with your team, and as well as enhancing, like, again, inline documentation within your blocks without necessarily having to rely solely on things like commenting. We are also exploring a couple of other like markup related features, like including like potentially something for sections where you're going to be able to group and kind of define different areas within your canvas that are all going to be moving in unison together. So those are just a couple of the items that are coming up, but we'll see lots of different markup enhancements, especially this year.
Great. Yeah, so it seems like we've exhausted most of the questions in the chat and covered them all, which is awesome. So thank you everyone for sending those in. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me and we can always get them answered. But yeah, as we wrap, huge thank you for everyone for coming out and jamming with us. Also a huge shout out to the product team for covering everything from conversation, AI workflows, LLMs and Voiceflow, best practices, and organizing the connected workflow and what's to come. It was definitely a huge one. So thanks again, and look forward to seeing everyone in our next newsroom.